Assert myself. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the penultimate episode of CS410J Advanced Java Programming here at Portland State University for the summer of 2013. We're almost done. Next week will be the final exam. We'll be sure to want to talk about that tonight. And let's see here. I'm a little behind on the lectures, but here again, the dependency injection, the advanced GWT stuff isn't stuff that you'll absolutely need for the course. Actually, I don't want to distract you. Question, Ben? Yeah.
You actually said on the Google Plus community,
Yep.
this is required.
Oh, I did?
For your project.
Oh, I totally.
Felt like you meant to say this is.
That's right, because I was probably sending it very late at night or
Unless
very
I
early in the
misread
morning.
that.
Is not required. Sorry. Not required. And just kidding. Yep, sorry, I'll never get that half hour of your life back again if you watched it. So, sorry about that. Anyway, I asked on the community, hey, what do you want to do tonight? Do you want to do like another programming kata? Do you want to dig into some GWT? I didn't hear a lot of responses. Have you guys started working with GWT yet?
A little bit.
A little bit. Would you like to spend some time tonight working with it? So basically, okay, good. So it sounds like you want to do some GWT stuff tonight. I was thinking what we could do, we could put a GWT front end on our Game of Life Kata from last week. And I think this would give an environment where you could play with stuff, maybe pair up with someone if you wanted. Based on sort of what you've seen of it so far, do you feel comfortable that you want to work with someone else, or would you just rather have me do some coding? You guys can ask questions, or a little bit of both. Okay, I'll start off. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
start off and go from there because I'm not super strong with it by any means.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So if you're finding that maybe you're a little bit lost, or you're a lot lost, don't worry. Or rather, don't be surprised and don't feel bad about it. The GWT stuff is sort of an order of magnitude more difficult than the stuff you're doing in the first couple of weeks, right? Whereas, command line, and okay, you've probably seen a lot of Java stuff before. The GWT stuff, it's still Java. There's like a different set of APIs you need to deal with. There's sort of a very different kind of programming than you've done before, and even things like the HTTP client server stuff from Project 4, while it might help inform you a little bit, there's these different abstractions that you do with in GWT. So I hope we can get some of that stuff cleared up tonight, or at least give you a record of here's some of the things you need to do in GWT. Yeah.
So I sort of remember in the GWT lecture you talked about serialization.
Yeah.
And what would the benefit of serialization be if the browser doesn't really know about Java objects?
The whole idea is that even though the browser doesn't know about Java objects, your program does. So you know about Java objects. And so, I'm sure what you guys did, well, whether you realize it or not, in your Project 4, when you had the HTTP client and server, you had to encode the appointment that was being created by the client and send it over to the server. Maybe just a bunch of key value pairs in the URL, or key value pairs in the post. But you still had to do that work. Now imagine how much more complex it would be if you had a very deep object graph, or if you had something with a lot of values that you had to encode and then make sure that they were properly URL escaped and all that good stuff. So the benefit of serialization is that it allows you, the code author, just to write your code and not have to worry about how the object is taken out of a Java VM on the server side, stuffed into text, and sent over HTTP and reconstituted into a JavaScript object on the client side.
So it wouldn't necessarily go between the client and the server because the client knows nothing about theoretically Java, right?
Well, that's the whole idea of GWT, is that even though, yes, the browser itself, its technology stacks, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, what you write as a programmer, as a code author, is Java. And a little bit of HTML, a little bit of CSS, and hopefully not too much JavaScript.
Okay.
And so you can write in Java on both sides, both the client and the server. So the vast majority of stuff that you do is in Java. A programming language I'm familiar with, set of APIs that you're familiar with, so you can use your tools, so you can use your programming patterns and have unit tests and all that good stuff. But then it all gets compiled into stuff that get deployed to a web browser. Yeah, Ben.
I have I guess I would say a bunch of questions, sort of related to the project and to GWT.
Okay.
Are we gonna bring up some live coding? And
I was going to do some live coding, but let's. What sort of topics do you want to see? And actually, this is true for anybody. So like, what kinds of things maybe you've read about, or like, what did he mean by this? Or I'll make sure to touch on those.
So, what to put on the client side, what to put on the server side.
Okay. Yep.
When does stuff get instantiated? So I'm wondering sort of if I want to store stuff on the server side.
Mm-hmm.
When does that class get instantiated? So like, are those going to be zipping in and out of existence?
Okay.
Or how much, like, theoretically we can do everything on the client side, right? Wouldn't be good, but I mean.
Well, yes and no. I mean, anything that's got to live beyond a page reload, something's going to be on the server, right? So, everything, no, not everything, you could put a lot of logic on the client side. There might be a reason to do that, right? By putting lots of, let's say, data validation. Like you guys have your appointment books, they have a date there, right? You could validate on either the client or the server. Actually, just like in your project 4, right? So I don't know how you guys did it, but when it comes to parsing the date, well, you could have the client side do it, the command line utility, parse the date, make sure it's okay. Or you could say, well, we're going to send the raw string that came in from the command line to the server and have the server validate it and then return an error. You could do the same thing in GWT. Can you think of some pluses and minuses why you'd want to do it either way? Okay, someone close the door, please. That guy's distracting me.
So it's better to do it on the server because you can never trust data that comes from a client.
That's a really good point. Yeah. So I mean, data validation on the server, it's HTTP, right? And so then anybody can reverse engineer the protocol, or just send off a request, especially something like your REST client, where there's a pretty nice URL, pretty well formatted. Can send off a request and maybe mess with your server. So for security reasons and data integrity reasons, validating on the server is a good idea. Yeah.
But if you're not concerned with security stuff, a lot of times you do client-side validation, so you don't have to send the actual HTTP request if somebody gives out an in their email address or something like that, and you can have it pop up and have some nice styling where it makes the box red and stuff like that.
That's a really good argument for doing it on the client side too. Is that okay? Why should you make a server request? Not only the extra lag it takes to go to the server, but also the increased load in your server just to do some data validation, which you can do in JavaScript. And speaking as a proud employee of Tripwire, the leading software security vendor, the blah blah whatever we are, you always should think about security. So the answer is both, right? And in a real application, you need to do both. Now it doesn't have to be exactly the same kind of validation; it has to be the same kind of error handling, because the server is more about data integrity and security and things like that, and the client is more about providing an understandable user interface. But yeah, I mean, so ultimately, the right answer is you do in both places. Awesome, good question. Okay, let's get started. So last week we wrote a Game of Life. Let me start the timer, because I'll just sit here and talk for days. I'll just do 20 minutes. I'll take a little break. Okay. Last time we put together a Game of Life application. We had like a text output. Actually, I don't think. Well, I guess ours sort of got that far. Mine sort of got that far. But now I want to have it there in a web browser. So I think, unfortunately, I can't really draw this, but here's what I'm thinking. You'll have a grid. That's a grid of boxes that have different colors for which cells are alive and which ones are dead. And you probably want a little bit of input, like the number of the number of rows, number of columns, and maybe a button that will, when you click it, it'll start going through the generations, and so you can have it see. And for the sake of experimentation, let's have all of the computation of the next generation be on the server, and then all the display logic and yeah, some amount of maybe like validating that yes, you're entering, the number of columns is 4 as opposed to Q. A little bit of data validation on the client. I didn't bring any dry erase markers to draw this. Well, anyway, that's kind of what I'm thinking. You guys sort of imagine what it might look like in your head? Okay. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the, let's see here. I'm going to use the Maven Archetype for project 5 because I know that gets me sort of a well-known starting point. So the appointment book GWT archetype, and I'm going to call it, instead of appointment book GWT, I'm going to call it Game of Kata, Game of Life, and then GWT. Sure, that's all good. Okay, I'm going to make Kata, Game of Life, GWT directory, and first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my IntelliJ project. We'll have some amount of sort of just like getting stuff ready here. Okay, so what this, oh yeah, I definitely want to open it. That's why I told you to open it. Okay, so this gets me an archetype where I have, let's see here, a very simple UI, and I have a little service, a remote service between them that just does the ping. And let's see here. Yes, I want to put it in Git so that you guys can share and love. And GWT framework detected. Okay, what do I need to configure there? Yes, GWT, go for it.
What does that do?
I think what it does is it tells, well, IntelliJ will start recognizing things as GWT. So like the ability to, like when you have remote services and their implementations, and so like if we go to, here on the client, we have like the ping service. Because it's a GWT project, it knows, for instance, that the ping service is associated with the ping service async. And so I think, you might have seen this in IntelliJ. It'll warn you. It's like, oh, hey, wait a second. Your async has a method that looks like this, but your corresponding, service, it doesn't have that same kind of method. So it basically, you're telling IntelliJ, oh yeah, this is a GWT project. Please do intelligent things with GWT.
Yeah, because I noticed if I would get the red underline, which I've always understood as compilation error, but then I can still actually compile it.
Right.
Yeah, normally it's just
Is that on the ping service IFPL?
well, just when you make like any change to it, even if it's not actually like a technical compilation error,
what's it complaining
it has
about?
the same behavior as if it was.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So it does all the debug, it compiles, it runs, but I still have that, and I can't figure out.
Huh. I just fixed it. Did it change anything?
Has what?
It's got like that little red squiggly underneath it that's like, it gives me an error saying remote service ping service is not registered.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Hey, so let's. Here's what I'm going to do first. I'm going to put stuff into. Put stuff into Git, so that it's got all sorts of stuff here. Oh, appointment book GWT. I'm going to get rid of that stuff. I don't think we need that. There's the archetype we created last time, and then we're going to refresh this. And now we should just have, I think there's a way to view by folder. Is that this one? Group by directory. Oh, much better. There we go. Nice. Okay, so I'm just going to add all these guys to VCS and default source main. That all looks good. Oops. Yep. Okay, so I'm just going to commit these guys, and I'm going to say added archetype project as a start of GWT version of the Game of Life Kata. analysis. It's nice and slow. Okay, so what were we just talking about? We were talking about how if you look at the ping service async impl, or sorry, the ping service impl, oh, it was complaining about something before, and now it doesn't anymore. What I did, so it was underlined in red. I did option return, option enter to fix it, and what it did was it added a new mapping here to the web.xml that explicitly mapped my ping service impl to such appointment book / ping, which was an interesting thing for it to do, but it made it happy. And now it's not complaining anymore. So I guess I won't worry about it too much. Okay, so we got that in there. Let's, just for like my own sanity, let's rename some things. So instead of all this appointment book nonsense, let's rename this. So Shift F6 to rename. Let's call it Game of Life GWT. Well, I'll call it Game of Life Entry Point. And that should have also, oh good, it did change this right here, so the entry point, that's good. And I also want to rename this file. So instead of appointment book GWT, I want to rename it, let's see here, I guess I can just call it Game of Life GWT. Yeah, it doesn't, I don't think it really matters. And let's see here, I think I might also need to update the, the POM XML. Yep. Game of Life GWT. Game of Life.
So obviously it won't update that with a refactor?
Yeah, which is unfortunate. I thought I was a little smarter than that. So it might, you know, well, what it would, yeah, so it must not, the Maven integration probably isn't there. Yeah. Appointment book GWT.html. Let's change this to Game of Life GWT HTML. And then rename this guy. Oh, and you know what? Maybe it's because I didn't have those two clicked. Okay. That's that. Okay. And so, well, whatever. Okay, let's see here. I'll keep the ping service for now. Appointment book and appointment, we'll probably be getting rid of those later. I changed. I didn't have to change anything here. That is true. I didn't have to change it. Oh no, I need to change this right here. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. Oops. Kata, Game of Life, GWT.
So that's the stuff that says
This is the, oh sorry, where?
right?
Like these guys?
No, the URL pattern on the server map.
Oh, that's a good point. It probably doesn't, but when we get to when we start messing with the services, what I'm going to do first is so the approach I'm going to take is I'm going to write the client stuff first. I'm going to write the UI stuff first. So remember the 3 steps of building a UI in GWT, where you create your widgets and then you lay them out and then you hook up the event handlers. Well, first I'm going to create the widgets and lay them out. Then we'll get to the event handlers. And so the service stuff will come in as part of the event handler stuff. Okay, but good point. Yeah, and we'll fix all that up there. Okay, so let's see what happens when we run it. Maven GWT run will start development mode. You guys remember what development mode is?
Runs in Java.
Yep.
It's interpreted up to this point.
Right. It builds your application and runs it in Java. So let's launch the browser. Let's see if it's.
I got a question
Yeah.
about this.
Uh-huh.
What is that? So that URL string
Yes.
puts up there at the top,
Uh-huh.
after the question mark.
The GWT code server.
What is that?
So let's see here. My understanding is that when you're running in development mode, okay, there's a jetty there, and when you hit the HTML, it sends down. Well, it's a web page that's got a plugin. It registers a plugin. Actually, if we look at the view, is this of any help? No, it doesn't really look like it's anything useful. Maybe it's the appointment book.no cache will do that. Right, it sends down special HTML that runs a browser plugin, and when you interact with the HTML with the web page, the browser plugin basically sends all these requests back to the server, and the server is running on port 9997. And then that's how, like, you click something in the browser, and that like low level DOM event, it triggers Java code to be running. So it makes it look like it's the JavaScript code. It's actually Java code. So that way you can set Java breakpoints and things like that in your Java debugger. Yeah, good. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, it looks like everything's working. My UI, my very simple UI, is displaying. I can go end to end. And so, okay, this is good. I'm going to commit here because things seem to be working. What's all this stuff? Okay, I want to ignore all that. Okay, and so then let me just take a look at the changes. Just rename stuff. Oops. Rename stuff. Next. So on a Macintosh, is the little caret control? Isn't that, or is it option? No. It's not command.
Caret control.
Isn't caret? Yeah, I thought caret. I just hit control right, and it doesn't change the next file, which is unfortunate. Oh, okay. Appointmentbook.no cache. What changed here? Must be white space only. Huh, okay, well, whatever. This guy got renamed. This guy. I just always like to just quickly review my changes before I put together my commit message, because oftentimes it's like, oh, there's something that changed and I didn't expect. But anyway, okay. So rename files to start looking. Oops. Start looking like a Game of Life application. Oh, cancel. Turn this off. I don't have time. Okay. Okay, so now let's start doing some stuff. Okay, so here is our application. And where does this code come from? Well, first of all, this here is boilerplate that's generated from the HTML. So that was oh wait, file name star.html. Oh, lame. Game of Life. Huh. Why am I not finding that? There it is. Okay, so this HTML file is the file that is downloaded to your to the browser when you hit the URL. So you get this HTML, and this appointmentbook.no cache.javascript. Well, you can think of that as the compiled JavaScript that that is your application, and the basically the application starts running here at your entry point. So entry point is an interface. And here in the so this is the entry point to your application. So your application starts with OnModuleLoad, and actually that is overridden. So I will add the @overrides interface. Oh, I guess I can. Override. Doesn't it like? We need to change the language level. We need to change the language level in the right place. We want Java 7. Reload, yes. Oh, I want to reload. Okay, super awesome. A little side note, the override annotation, you guys remember what this is? This is like a method overrides another one. There was, I think is generally acknowledged as a bug in Java 5, where if you put an @override annotation on a method that implements an interface, it complained about it. And it was kind of dumb, so in Java 6 they changed it. So what I just did there is I told IntelliJ, oh yeah, hey, this is Java 7 source code, so don't complain about stuff like that. Oh, here's another one. It's adding all over the place. Anyway, okay, now you're making me angry. Well, actually, so I have a button right now. And so the GWT program starts here in your entry point and it starts executing your OnModuleLoad. And the reason it knows to do this is because here in your .gwt.xml file, you told it that the entry point was this class right here, Game of Life entry point. So you tell it here, and so GWT says, okay, great, I'm going to start executing on the OnModuleLoad method of this. It's going to use reflection, and I use air quotes because it's all compiled JavaScript stuff. We can pretend it's reflection to then go instantiate one of these Game of Life entry point objects and call OnModuleLoad. Okay, right now what I do is I have a button, I do some stuff when I click that button, and I then add that button to the root panel. Now the root panel basically represents the web page itself. So like this whole thing right here is the root panel. Now I don't want a button, because I don't want a button yet. So I'm going to get rid of the button. And instead I'm going to want I'm going to reformat this because it's a little easier to read. Instead what I want is I want like a table. I want a grid or something. So when I'm in need of a widget in GWT, I go to the docs. So remember all of the widgets. The widgets are Java classes, and there are Java docs, API docs for all of this stuff. And so I'm here looking in, and as you can see, this GWT API is huge. Look at all these classes. What I want, though, is the, what's the name of this? It's the UI. Google GWT user client UI package. This is where most of the widgets live. I'm going to want something which looks like a table, like a grid. Okay, what is a grid? A grid is a rectangular. You guys see that okay? Make it a little bigger. Rectangular grid that can contain text, HTML, or child widgets within its cells. Must be explicitly resized to the desired number of rows and columns. Sounds kind of promising, right? Okay, let's have one of those. Let's take a look at these API docs. Okay, so we got, here is a little grid example, and so you can create a grid with 5 rows and 5 columns. You can put some text in it. You can also put another widget in it. So widgets are, well, widgets, things like buttons or whatever. And there's something called a cell formatter that allows you to affect the layout of the cell's grids. And actually this is kind of good. Okay, so I can set the width of, it looks like a cell at a given row and column to a given width, and that's good, right? Because like what I want is I want a big grid of squares, and I want them to have colors and things like that. So self formatter looks pretty interesting and pretty valuable. UI binders is well beyond the scope of our discussion right now. So this is like a promising class. So I can create a grid with number of rows, number of columns. I can get the number of rows and columns. That's good. The number of cells total. That's kind of interesting. Clear cell. I'll keep that in mind for later, maybe. Remove, resize columns, resize rows. Okay, well that's good because what I'm gonna want, I think eventually, is the user can put in how many rows, how many columns they want, and want to dynamically change. So this looks like a pretty good class for me to use. Grid. Yeah.
So I was doing some looking around because I wanted like examples of what it looks like, right? And I came across Google Web Toolkit, and they got a showcase of features.
Yeah, the showcase is good.
Like, do, like on the side of that, like menu bar, different images of what it will look like, or examples of it, and it seems like pretty good.
Is it this one? No, that's Smart GWT.
I can post it on.
Yeah, that'd be super awesome. Yeah. Oh, it's probably maybe this off of here. Oh, 20 minutes. I want more. 20 minutes. That'll probably be too long. Well, whatever. We'll see. Yes. So like samples, real world projects. Yeah, GWT showcase. Cool. Anyway, yeah. So right. So if you're actually, yeah, it'd be really good to spend a few minutes sort of messing around here to see what kinds of things like file upload. Probably not so important for your guys', but yeah, custom buttons. So I wonder if there's anything panel. Oops.
The grids are.
Oh, it doesn't seem to. What's going on there? Oops. What's going on here? That's weird. Doesn't it like?
It's in cell widgets.
Cell widgets?
Just actually click on here.
Oh, Thank you.
And it's neat because they give you like source code, like so you can see how kind of some of the features.
Oh, right. These are the cell widgets. Yeah, yeah. This is kind of more advanced stuff than, but yes, yeah. I mean, actually, feel free to play around with these. It's yeah, it's really cool stuff.
How do you get the source code on this?
Source code.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So it's
Slick.
not full blown, but it gives you most of the stuff, like all their little, you know, where you can resize and how they place them.
Yeah, nice. Okay, good. Yeah, thanks for that pointer. Okay, close out some of this stuff. Okay, so right, let's have one of these grids. So let's see how well I remember the API. So instead of a button, we're going to want a grid. Congo UI grid. Grid equals new grid, and let's just start it out with a 5x5 grid.
That root panel,
Yes.
that's instantiated through some other mechanism.
Yeah. So root panel. So this is a static method, get. So there's one root panel that basically is the DOM object for the entire page.
Yeah. And that
Right.
gets generated when the OnModuleLoad gets called, I'm assuming.
Yes. So remember all this Java. Here again, I don't know how familiar you guys are with JavaScript and DOM and things like that, but all this Java code gets compiled into JavaScript, and so then rootpanel.get is just a well, actually, let's see what we got here. Let's turn on the tools and see if we can actually. Oops, developer tools. Let's see what we got for. Oh, obfuscated. Never mind. Okay. Yeah. So I was hoping that I'd be able to show you in the code like where the that it actually goes and then gets some DOM element or whatever, but it ain't pretty enough. Ooh, that's kind of cool. On injection done. Okay, anyway. Okay. Oh, and do you guys see what I just did there? Google, so this is Chrome I'm using, and so they have tools for like browsing the DOM and things like that. So I can use like this. Oops. I can use like this guy right here to then like click on this guy, and it'll bring me right to it, so I can see the HTML that represents the DOM there and everything like that. Awesome. Okay, so now I'm going to reload this. And now, well, you can't see it, but it's there. Actually, if I like highlight it, yeah, okay, there is my grid, my table. And actually, if I then browse into this, sure enough, there are all of my tables. Now, this isn't what I want, right? I want squares and I want colors. So let's start adding some colors. Let's figure out how to do that. There were some intriguing things here. Let's see here. And by this grid is a subclass of this thing called HTML table. And this has some interesting stuff like cell padding. Let's take a look at HTML table, see what it's got. Cell formatter, that looked promising. What's a cell formatter? So let's see here. Get DOM count, get cell formatter. Cell formatter lets you add styles. That's CSS style. We'll see that in a little bit to the cell. And height and width.
So
Yep.
they're with like or any length or whatever, like they have like PX, IN. So I assume IN and CM are like inches or centimeters, but like PX.
Pixels and EM. So this is all webby stuff. So pixels, a dot on the screen, and M is it's basically relative to the font size. So that right, yeah, and so then it's the height of the letter M. Basically, is 1 M, and so then as you increase your font, so that way it's relative. So if you want like an absolute value, like maybe for an image or something like that, use a pixel as opposed to like M. So if it's like relative text, and there's for spacing and stuff, M's are better to use. Yep. So let's see here. My HTML is old and rusty and stuff. So I might be able to set the background of cells and things like that. But I think what I really want to do is I want to put a widget in each cell and then control that widget. And well, I'm thinking HTML. I'm thinking I want a div in each one, and I think divs are represented by panels.
I think it's HTML panel. You can do
Let's see. Yeah, HTML panel. Let's see what that's all about.
maybe put arbitrary HTML.
Panel contains HTML, which can attach child widgets to identified elements within that HTML. That's interesting. Well, I could use this and put a div in there, but I think panel subclass is a panel, complex panel, header, HTML table is a panel, simple panel. Only contains one widget. Creates an sorry.
Aren't most of these facilities also available in the standard Java without VWT?
How so?
Like many of the classes to create these panels or all these features.
Ah, okay, yes. What's available in like the JDK is Swing, is AWT, which are for thick clients, right? So I mean, completely different from a web UI, right? Thick client is like, well, like IntelliJ, right? It's something that runs on my machine. There's not a client server behind it. It's a traditional application, using the native window manager and all that kind of stuff. And Java has Swing and AWT, which is Swing's predecessor, that provide a Java API to model all of these things. And the GWT API is greatly influenced by that. So yes, I mean, if you're familiar with Swing or AWT, you see a lot of the same concepts. That's completely on purpose. Because they're like, well, okay, well, this, Java programmers are familiar with that style of programming. And so GWT gives you that same style of programming, except that instead of representing native applications, it represents a web application.
So hypothetically, if we do not have GWT,
Yeah.
I wonder, would we have been able to do all that we're doing in GWT by the standard Swing or AWT?
Yes, but you'd end up with a very different application. Instead of one delivered over the web, you'd have one that you would run on your desktop. And if you took this course 10 years ago, that's what you've been doing. But
It would not allow you to do web programming?
correct, because I mean, what you'd have to do is you'd have to either download the application and run it locally, or run it inside an applet. Right, an applet is basically a JVM that runs inside your browser, and you get a little chunk of your browser real estate, and it's slow and it's insecure, and it makes it feel like it's 1998 all over again. So, yeah, we thought it was cool back then, right? And so that's like passe and bad. Instead, because it did install a plugin and everything like that. Instead, what GWT lets you do is write your application in Java, and then but still deploy it over the web, so as a web application instead of like something that you download and run natively. Okay. Yeah, sorry.
On the same note, on that same topic, what's associated security-wise with, and maybe naive, but running this stuff like the browser versus if you had something like Java client on, like a hard big client on your desktop?
Well, I mean, security-wise, because GWT leverages web technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it is as secure, insecure as any other application built using those technologies. And actually, I should say not only HTML, JavaScript, CSS, but also AJAX, right? So it uses the XHR, the XML HTTP request object, to communicate back and forth. So I would say. So there's whatever security is there in that technology stack. So it depends on your browser and how secure it is. But unlike Flash-based applications or Java, Java applets, Java plugins, any other plugin, or Silverlight or ActiveX or anything like that, you're not installing a plugin, right? You're just running using the standard web technologies. So, I mean, I think there is more security in that because the plugins just aren't as secure as what's there in the browser because it hasn't been exercised as much. Yeah, good question. Okay, back to the code. Okay, so I've got my grid. I want to put some stuff in it. So I'm going to populate the grid. So for int row equals grid.get row count, while row, I did it again, 0. While row is less than grid.get row count, row plus plus. For int column equals 0 while column less than grid.get column count. Look how smart it is. Column plus plus. Okay, so for every cell in the column, I'm going to want a panel that's a cell. No, I don't want it to be that panel. There was your example of a GWT, a GWT class having the same name as a AWT class. And I want this to be one of these. We're looking at the simple panel. Yeah, simple panel. Simple panel, and that'll give me a div, and I want to set the set height. Let's just have it 10 pixels. Yeah.
Question, just sort of as a convention, why would you define that as a panel as opposed to directly as a simple panel?
Oh, program to the interface. I don't care that it's a simple panel. Sort of like conceptually, it's just a panel. I don't really care that it's a simple panel. Here, it probably doesn't make much of any difference. I don't know.
So is there any situation where you would sort of need to do one of that? I just wonder a lot of times, like when you instantiate a collection or something like that, is there a reason to do it one way or the other?
There is. Anybody got an idea of why you'd want to sometimes have a variable typed as the abstract versus as the more concrete?
Well, you can pass it to other stuff. That's not the reason. Stuff
That expects the more concrete class. Yeah, you'd have to. Also, if there are methods that are only on the concrete class, so for instance, linked list. So the list API, so that interface, the list interface, has get and set and things like that. But linked list, which implements list, introduces the notion of like remove first and remove last. So there are, or does it have push and pop? It might have push and pop semantics too. I can't remember, but that'd be another reason where it's like, oh, okay, there is functionality that I need on the subclass, so I'd use the subclass. But in general, I prefer to just be as abstract as possible, so I'm not worried about all that other stuff. So I know that I'm not relying on something in simple panel. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to set the height and the width, and then I'm going to say grid.set widget at the row, at the column, and then the cell. Okay, so now let's go reload the application. Right, I'm just reloading the page here. Still thinking about it. Did not compile or something? No, just taking its own sweet time. There it is. Okay, now I've got my table. Inside my table, my body, I've got rows. Inside each D, I've got a div that is 10 by 10. Awesome, I can't see them though. So, oops, I just moved something. Yeah, I can't even select them very well. Okay, well this is kind of hard to read. Okay, so now I want to color these guys different colors. Let's go, so I've got a simple panel. Do I have anything here about color? No. So I think what I'll need to do for color is I'll need to use a style. Are you guys at all familiar with CSS? A little bit. Do you know what CSS is? Cascading style sheets. So the whole idea is that in web development, the HTML is all about the structure of your document, sort of like where things are, where they're arranged, how they're laid out. And HTML is a decent language for that. For style, for colors, for spacing, HTML isn't very good for that. There's something called CSS, cascading style sheets, which allow you to abstract all that stuff, all of the particular colors, fonts, what bold, what what things should be displayed which ways. And so basically what you do in your HTML is that instead of saying, I want this text to be bold, you say something like, this is important text. And then your style sheet is the thing that determines that, okay, yeah, important text is bold. Because it might be that in another situation, important text might be red. Right? So it's sort of like a different semantic meaning. So it's like the structural meaning is that it's important, and then when I go and draw it prettily, I'm going to have it have another meaning. And of course, this then allows you to change your style sheet without having to change your HTML and all sorts of good stuff like that. Anyway, the way GWT deals with this is the following. Every widget has an add style or a set style. I'm just going to say set style name because I only need one of them here. And I'm going to call it cell-alive.
How do you know if that's a class or an ID? Like, what
It doesn't matter because here I'll show you why. What was it saying? Unknown CSS class. Oh, that's kind of neat. It's warning me about it. So now when I go and reload it, it's just the actually it's going to be the class. If you wanted an ID, you would say set ID. So the class of this cell now is now cell-alive. Cell-alive isn't terribly interesting because there's no style on it. So I wonder what this tells me here. So if I try to fix this, what's it going to do? Inject language, remove braces. That's pretty useless. So now I'm going to go back to my HTML file. So probably the right way to do this is to have like a special style sheet class. I'm too lazy to do that right now. I want text CSS. I'm going to reformat this thing so it's easier to read. And dot cell alive. Okay. Background color. Thank you so much, IntelliJ, because I know very little CSS. If it's alive, let's have it be blue. No, not black. So it'll be blue. Okay, now let's reload. Oh, I didn't do that right. It has to be div.cellalive, which kind of surprises me, but
I would pick up on it.
am I supposed to use pound here? When do I use pound? Is pound the selector? I know nothing about CSS. Oh, that worked. Okay, right, because dot is like dot's a what's the right word? Yeah, selector. Yeah, or something. Okay. I know just enough CSS to make myself dangerous. So, and unfortunately, IntelliJ isn't smart enough to figure out that this is used someplace. But let's see if it's still complaining. Yeah, it's not quite smart enough to figure it out. Maybe I put it in a file called .css. Anyway, okay. So now, okay, great. Got a bunch of blue things. Just for the heck of it, let's say the following: if row times column mod 2 equals 0, then we'll call it alive. Up. Otherwise, we'll call it dead. That's what's complaining about. No, we don't have a format. Okay, and now let's go and add cell dead, background color black, whatever. Oops, what didn't it like? What didn't it like there? Oh, it's been 20 minutes. Let me quick, okay, let's see here. Does this work? Oops. Huh. Anybody got an idea of what's going on here?
Are they getting the style?
They are not. Oh wait, that didn't
Are they
reload.
getting the class?
They are getting the class. Okay, it didn't load correctly. That was weird. Okay. Okay, good. And like, it's not very well. Black and blue are not good colors. Let's just do red and black then. There you go. Okay. Oh, sometimes I have to do a shift reload in order to get all that. Okay. Okay. So what we've done so far, we're creating our widgets, and so we created a grid and we put panels inside them, and now okay, good. We've got the beginnings of our application. So let's take a little break. Let's take 10 minutes until 7 o'clock, and then we'll keep going.